This is AJ from Drum Magazine, here to talk about Aquarian's Modern Vintage 2 and Deep Vintage 2 heads. The Modern Vintage 2 and Deep Vintage 2 heads use Aquarian's patented vintage coating, which is what gives the head its kind of natural color like that. But these new vintage heads are 2-ply heads as opposed to Aquarian's old single-ply vintage models. The Modern Vintage 2 heads use two 7mm plies, and the Deep Vintage heads use two 10mm plies. The result is a fatter, slightly softer sound that has a lot of really great depth. So let's go ahead and hear it. Up first, we'll try the Modern Vintage 2 heads on a thin-shelled maple kit with nice sharp bearing edges. So now let's try the Deep Vintage 2 heads on the same kit, tuned to the same tension. I think you'll hear a lot more fatness and of course a much deeper tone. So now I'm going to try the heads on a vintage bop kit. This is a 60s era kit with shells that are just a little bit wider than modern shells are today. Plus it's got reinforcement rings and very wide round over bearing edges to kind of soften up the sound just a little bit. First, I've got the modern vintage heads on top and classic clears all around on bottom. On the bass drum, I've got the deep vintage head on the batter side and the modern vintage head on the resonant side. Now I've got the same configuration, but I've swapped out the modern vintage heads on the toms and snare drum for the deep vintage heads. One other feature I really liked about both the Modern Vintage and Deep Vintage 2 series was the pre-installed muffling strip on the inside of every bass drum head. It's a pre-cut felt strip that's glued to the inside of the head, so it's not customizable or removable or anything, but it did give just the right amount of muffling to get that warm, round vintage tone. With the strips in place, I didn't really have to add any extra muffling to either bass drum when I used the heads. Thanks so much for watching. Read the full review in issue 214 of Drum Magazine and learn more about the Modern Vintage 2 and Deep Vintage 2 drum heads at aquariandrumheads.com.